me to
Speak
get
into
up
that
there.
microphone.
This microphone there?
Or turn it on first.
Hello, hello? Is that better?
Yep.
People tell me I don't talk loud enough. That sounds great to me, but I realize you all can't hear me as well, so. All right, I'd like to talk a little bit about Morse code. It's something that I teach. I teach it every twice a week, and actually 4 times a week, most weeks, over Zoom. And it's a mode of communication that's still available in the world. It's used a whole lot. People say it's gone away, but it really hasn't. So we'll just see if we can get through this. So basically, CW is a mode of communicating information. Morse code is a language that can be communicated with CW. CW means continuous wave, and it was originally a means of keying a signal on and off, and that broken or unbroken signal would be the means of communication. Now we use tones, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the different ways that was used. So basically, it's a method. Morse code itself is a code that encodes text characters using a sequence of 2 different signal durations called dots and dashes, or dits and das. There's 26 basic letters in the Morse code alphabet, 10 numbers, and several pieces of punctuation. Mostly 4 pieces of punctuation we use more than anything else, and that we teach more than anything else. The other ones are only specialized punctuation that are only used in some circumstances. Each Morse code symbol, of course, is formed by a sequence of dits and dots, or dashes and dots, and it can be memorized and sent in many forms that are perceptible to other people. Sound waves, visible light. Let's just move to the next slide here. What's going on? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about telegraphy before I go up too much further. Telegraphy itself it means long distance communication, and it requires a method of encoding messages that are known to both the sender and the receiver. Originally, smoke signals, beacons, reflected lights, flags, semaphores was used back in the early 19th century to communicate before electricity came about and before many other forms of communication. And that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the development of all of that. So originally, it says here the first telegraphs came in the form of optical telegraphs, smoke signals, beacons, reflected light. There's a little joke that we used in Morse code, in my Morse code classes. Sending Morse code ain't easy, especially with smoke. In ancient China, soldiers were stationed along the Great Wall, and they would alert each other of impending attacks by signaling from tower to tower. In this way, they could transmit messages over 470 miles in just a few hours.
Wow.
North American Indians used to communicate with smoke signals. Each tribe had its own signaling system, and there was no standardized system in those days. The grass it was subject to rain, wind, all kinds of things. The day or night would have different effects upon it. Same way with any signaling device. But the optical telegraph was one of the first ones that was developed that really began sending telegraph signals from one place to another. This optical telegraph was developed in 1792 by a gentleman named Claude Chappe. As you can see, it has rotating arms up here, 3 sets of rotating arms that are controlled by ropes. And the positioning of these arms would indicate different letters or numbers. At the height of the French Revolution, France needed some kind of swift communication so they could keep the war effort going and keep their enemies from causing them problems. They were at war with the Netherlands, Prussia, Austria, and Spain. A whole bunch of people were trying to attack the French, and so Chappe came up with this thing that would establish a line of stations between Paris and Lille, France, a distance of over 230 kilometers. Actually, that's 143 miles. And it helped Napoleon dispatch his soldiers and fight the war a whole lot better. The towers required operators in special towers about every 20 miles, and it could only accommodate about 2 words per minute, so there wasn't any high-speed communication going on between these towers, but they could pass messages over a long distance in a short period of time. Here's another system available. These were kind of paddles or wafers that could be flipped, and they had different patterns. Here's a very good, this is called the shutter system. This is Chappe's system, and you can see each one of these positions of these arms represented a different letter or number or symbol. And this is only 2 of the arms. There's actually separate, some of them had actually 3 sets of arms. So that's the early systems. This is what they look like inside. You see there's a rope system down here. Here's a picture of one that still exists today. These were on top of hilltops spread out between towns. We'll just skip that. That's a time chart there. So this was useful for government, but it's very expensive for commercial uses. So if you wanted to send messages, it was about your business or something else. It was very difficult. You had to pay a lot of money because these people didn't have time for that. And of course, when the telegraph came about, it really made that a lot better. In the United States, the first optical system was developed by a man named Jonathan Grout. It was 65 miles long, and it connected Martha's Vineyard with Boston. And the purpose was to transmit news about shipping information, about the ships coming into port and when they were coming and how they were arriving, because that was real critical. People wanted to know when certain supplies would be available. And in San Francisco, there's a hill named Telegraph Hill, and that was one of the telegraph stations that was used back in those days. The hill's still there, of course, but there's no telegraph station there anymore. Some very real rich people live up there nowadays. So finally, they decided, well, we need to keep developing this. It was real expensive and not very easy because you couldn't. There's a lot of flat spaces where there are no places, so you'd have to build your own tower or you'd have to do something else. So, but over the years, back in 1837, a couple of gentlemen named Cook and Wheatstone developed a system that used a number of needles on a board that could be moved to point to different letters on that board. And here's a picture of it. You can see here there's letters on this board. There's needles here at different positions. It was a 7-wire system, so there was actually 7 wires stretched across a short distance because it's very difficult to stretch those wires out and keep them safe. Originally they were put in an iron conduit. That didn't work out very well. Anytime it developed a problem, it was hard. You had to get that wire out of that system. So, and it could only. It was a. I'm sorry. There's another drawback that I can't remember. Oh, it didn't use J, Q, or Z. Those letters weren't available because there weren't enough positions on the board for that. But fortunately, well, no, there's a little more information here about it. Let's see. No. We'll skip that slide. Fortunately, a gentleman named Samuel Morse developed, him and his assistant, Alfred Vail, came up with a system of signaling using Morse code. They used a 2-wire system. One long wire stretched out, and then they just used ground on the other end, which would be just because Earth is a common ground everywhere. So it was really a 2-wire system, but they didn't always have to use 2 wires. Sometimes the system would work just with just 1 wire. The first telegram in the United States was sent on Morse 11th by Morse on January 11th of 1938, about 2 miles of wire in Morristown, New Jersey. But that's not the most famous one, because in 1844, which is actually, you can see that 6 years later, the famous telegram, the famous message, "What hath God wrought?" from the Capitol in Washington to Mount Clair in Baltimore was sent. And from that time on, people started buying into telegraphy. They could see that it would work. They started sending messages. The system started growing, grew real slow on the East Coast, and then it just suddenly took off because they found more and more ways to stretch wire. The wire was the problem. You had to have some way to push this system out. How did I get to wireless telegraphy there? Sorry, give me just a second here to figure out what happened. We can talk about wireless telegraphy. We need to talk a little bit more about. Yeah, let's talk about this. We'll come back to wireless because we're still not wireless. First of all, we had wire technology, and that's the first technology that was really developed in the United States. Morse Vail came up with their system. You see this key down here. This key was not what was originally used for sending telegraphy. Originally, the imprinting telegraph was used. This one at the top here, there's a spool of tape here that was pushed through this punch machine, and this machine would punch the letters based upon a signaling system that was sent from the other side. And so the message was actually punched into this tape. Well, the operators heard that punch tape, and they got used to hearing that sound, that click-clack, that punching that was going on, and that's where they developed the ability to know what was being sent without reading it. They developed the ability to hear the code. And once they realized that was a system, that it really speeded this up because it changed the process quite a bit. And you can see here the next, this is a telegraph key that was eventually used. And you get the same process, you get the same sounds, You use a key to send it and a keyer to make the sound. Here's an example of what it. The interesting thing about this is it's not to send a letter. It's either the length of time between the click and the clack. Now, they had sounders, big wood sounders put up around this so the sound was amplified so you could hear it, but this was all the sound there was. There was no other tone but this click and this clack. And so it took twice as long to send a letter as it does, well, maybe not twice as long, it was a different system. It's very difficult for me to encode, to copy this code because it's a two-sound system, and it's not the same sound that I'm used to hearing with Morse code. And we'll get into that much later, but this is the original system. So all they needed was a wire to connect it between these stations. This key here, as you see up here on the screen, there's a shorting device. So they would close that. Now the wire is closed, so the wires between stations would be all closed. When someone wanted to send a message from one station to the other, he would break the line. Now the line is open, so I'm the only one that can send, and when I send, all the same sounder is activated all up and down the line, so people down the line, down the train line or whatever line it is, get that signal. And when I'm done, I reclose that line, and then somebody else can send a message, and when they send a message, I hear it here on my sounder. And that's the way it worked in the old days. It didn't take a whole lot of voltage or current to do it. It's amazing what a little bit of power will do. You could go about 20 miles on just about 30 volts, and then the signal would break down a little bit, so they put a device in there to amplify that signal and pass it on down the line. If it was just a battery station, that would add a little voltage to the line. It worked extremely well. Over a period of time, these lines moved out over across the nation. Here's an example there's one of the sounders I was talking about. See, this big wood box here would actually amplify the sound of those click-clack devices. And you see all these people working in this room. You can imagine all that clicking going on at the same time. But it's amazing what you can focus on in a short period of time.
So it would be one person on one line. All the other people had their own wire.
Each one of those was going to a different station, a different place. In New York, New York became a big central point for communications, and so a lot of traffic was passed through there, and then passed back out again over other networks to different cities. I have a picture of that here in a minute. In 1848, somebody said it's anticipated that the whole populous parts of the United States will, within 2 or 3 years, be covered with a spider's web. And it was almost prophetic because that's actually what happened. In 1891, we have what was called the Victorian Internet. Telegraphy was spread all over the world. You can see this is not a very map. It's not very. Can you see that room? Telegraph lines were spread all over Europe. There was a transcontinental line under the ocean between Europe and America. Cables under that. There was a cable between Europe and South America. And one of the major hubs was what came through England, of course, out of Europe. They call this the Victorian Internet. Here's a picture of New York in those days. You can see all those wires. That's the way it actually looked. An incredible amount of telegraphy was going on. Signals were being processed all over town. They used telegraphs for everything. And it became, the general population started sending telegrams because it was very cheap and you could send messages to each other. One interesting thing, parents were really worried because their children would be sending messages to girls and boys would be exchanging messages over telegrams. And so the parents were worried. They were afraid that this new system was going to affect their children and really bother them, kind of like the internet today. It actually became a problem because it was so cheap to send things. Here's another example of a sounder and a key. Here's what the Morse code actually looked like in those days. You can see there's 3 different codes shown up there. The one on the left is Morse code, the actual international Morse code. At that time it was pretty international at that time. There was a continental code, the one in the middle, that was the one that was on wireless telegraphy that was sent across the wires all across the United States. And the Navy had its own system. And there's several letters that are the same, but they are not all the same. So it's a whole different telegraphy. And there's still people that practice all these codes, but the international Morse code is the one that is used mostly today. This is a telegram. This is the first telegram from when Orville writes. Announced their successful first flights in this telegram. I don't know why I have that. But one of the biggest things that happened was used for the telegraph was used for was train orders and train movements. You know, the trains spread out all over the United States, everywhere. Every city had a train running through it, and finally the trains ran from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast, and all along every train line were telegraph wires. And so that was one of the advantages. They could follow those the pre set up lines were already set up. The trains used them, of course, to do things. Here, this is a picture of a wreck. Obviously, that didn't work very well. These two trains met on the same track, so they didn't get their orders like they should. Here's a breakdown of back in the optical telegraph back here in 1791. Chappie put his into work. I'm trying to read this. I can't read this very well. There's really not much message here. No, we'll just skip that. Okay, finally, Julio, I know this and I can't say it. Guglielmo Marconi invented wireless, or the radio system, in 1901. The first telegraphic message was sent across the Atlantic by wireless, in radio actually. And so you can see here on the bottom there's some very large towers. These are the towers that were set up on the East Coast to receive the message. Regular commercial service commenced wirelessly in 1907. There's more timeline. One of the most famous stories is about the telegraphy that was used during the sinking of the Titanic, the way the ships communicated with each other, and the SOS message that was sent out. They also sent out a message that was CQD, which is the original distress message in Morse code. But SOS was the one that was being developed. It's real interesting. There were different companies. Morse had his own company, and he had his own telegraphers. And so if you wanted to send a message, you had to use Morse's telegraphers and pay Morse's fees. There were other companies who sent telegrams, and if you used them, you had to pay their fees. And you might have to pay both fees if they were going to interconnect. And so it's a real interesting, there's an incredible amount of information about the old days in telegraphy and how it was used. But the problem is, some people were still using CQD, which was the one distress signal, and the newer methods were SOS is what they were sending. So the telegraphers on the Titanic actually sent both intermittently, hoping that it would work, and some of it did. Unfortunately, I don't know if you've ever read the story of the Titanic. They hit an iceberg. They were in the middle of an ice field. There was another ship not very far away that could have got to them very easily, but they had turned off their system for the night, and so they didn't hear the system. In fact, they called the Titanic and was trying to warn them of icebergs. And the operator on the Titanic was sending messages from his people to people in America. And he said, "Shut up, leave me alone, I don't care about that, I'm sending messages." And so the guy said, "Okay," and he shut off his radio and went to bed. Well, if he'd have known about it, they could have steamed over there and saved a whole lot more people. I think the story is really interesting and tragic, of course. Just the thought of being out in the middle of a freezing ocean and only having a few boats is really scary.
Hey, Joe, what was the distance between the ships that they could communicate wirelessly? I mean,
well, it's almost, it could be 500 miles, it could be 5 miles.
Oh.
It depends on propagation. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's not. But it's actually very good because the signal goes out and it's just at different strengths at different locations. So for instance, I'll give you a good example of that. The distance is just, is proportional to the propagation. That's hard to say. They could be heard 100 miles away or 200 miles away.
Was it a linear or was it an amplified?
At the time they were using spark gap, and the spark gap was a very loud spark of noise. So it had a wide spectrum in the electronic spectrum, and it was really harsh. So it was easy. It was more easily heard than some other signals are today.
You couldn't hear it with your ear. You'd have to have a receiving
you had
device.
To have something that could be affected by.
Huh.
So they had special receivers for that. And they developed a whole system after this. After this period of time, they came up with a system that was required that every ship listen constantly. at certain times of the day, certain hours, there were silence times when nothing was sent except emergency traffic. So they had a clock, and on this clock there would be a red bar on this clock, and during this period of time you could not send messages, you had to listen. And they listened on a certain frequency, and that frequency was always an emergency frequency, and it developed a whole system of that over the years for oceanic, or for ship to shore, and aviation actually.
Hey Joe, could you move the microphone? We got some noise coming from the.
Move it closer?
You move it closer to you.
God, I sound awful loud to me. I feel like I'm shouting.
We got lawnmowers going off over here.
How's that?
Is that better? Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, so after following the Titanic disaster, wireless became real popular. People heard about it. They found out it was important. There was ways to send information. The demand for telegraphers just exploded. If you wanted a job, just learn Morse code. In those days, there were schools all around the country trained thousands and thousands of operators because they needed them for everything. They needed them for railroads. Western Union used them to send telegraphs. The oceanic cable circuits were available. The newsrooms started sending news over the wire. You could tell what's going on. They did baseball games over the wires, all kinds of stuff. And of course, shipboard operators, there was really a big demand for that. People that wanted to get on board a ship and sail around sending messages. Even during the Depression in the 1930s, you could still get a job as a telegrapher. They were still a very popular job because they were still using them. So as the industry grew, the capacity for lines grew. They needed more and more lines. They need to find more ways to send messages and more ways to broadcast messages and receive messages, of course. The Morse code key, as you see here, the straight key, it's called a straight key because it's just a simple up and down motion. It can be used to send about 20 words per minute. Some people can send code a little faster with those. It's simple straight key, simple up and down motion, dits and das. They came up with other methods that were faster keys that were called speed keys. I don't think I have it plugged in yet. Let me plug this guy in. Stop. This is called a bug or a mechanical bug. It wants to talk. I don't know if I get that up. There's a picture of one here down here in the bottom. This is a little bit different version, but it is. And you can see this one's really sensitive. The da is made by just pushing on one side and it's constant. So that's the da. But the dit is a mechanical operation.
Wow.
It's designed, it should actually run at least five dits or more. So the longer it runs, the better. But of course you don't want to send all those dits. This guy is too close. Stop that. It's not supposed to do that. Stop. It's an adjustment. All right. I'm not going to play with him right now because I'll drive me crazy. But it was a way of sending code faster, Morse code much faster.
Could a person read being that fast?
Oh yeah, that's not very fast at all, really. 20 words per minute is not very fast. It seems very fast to most people, and as they're learning Morse code, it seems very fast. But you have operators that can operate 30 to 60 words a minute. There's guys that can copy code at incredible speeds.
Wow.
But it takes a long time to develop that skill. And the problem is, no matter how fast you get at Morse code, the other guy has to be as fast as well. Because I can send to you at 30 words a minute, but if you can't copy except 20 words a minute, then I'm wasting my time. Because you're going to be constantly asking me, what? What? And there's ways to do that in Morse code. We have procedures for that. Let me make sure I don't drift off too fast here. Okay, so they came up with another method called a keyer, and it uses an electronic keyer. The keyer sends dits and das based upon the position, the key that you push. So if I push the da key, it sends das. If I push the dit key, it sends dits. I mean, it's just pretty straightforward. You can set the speed by adjusting the speed on the device you're saying. This is actually a radio that I have here. This is one of my radios. This radio communicates around the world. It's not very big. It has 6 bands. It's a very powerful little radio. It only puts out 5 watts. but I can talk around the world on 5 watts. But this has a key. This has a keyer built into it. That's a little thing called Ben's Best Bent Wire. That's what I actually just sent. Ben's Best Bent Wire. It has a nice rhythm to it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when you receive the message, you can't write that fast. Do you take it down in like a shorthand?
Basically, yes, that's true. That's what we do. Yes. The thing is, it depends on the operation. You know, we have a group of people that send message traffic across the United States every day. It used to be a really big system. So what they do is they take in message traffic. People want to send a message. Like say you wanted to send a message to a relative in New York. So you'd give me the message, excuse me, at a certain time of the night. I would check into a traffic net, and I would send that message based upon the address you gave me to the net operator. And he would pass it up the chain, further up the chain until it got to New York. And then some operator in New York would copy it down, and they would either call your relative or person or deliver that message. And that message system still goes on today. It's not as well used as it used to be, but during the war and during Vietnam and all those days, a lot of traffic was sent overseas by a group of operators using these stations called MARS stations, which is it's a whole different system, but the military set it up, and they would provide the service for it, and you could send messages home from overseas that way to amateur radio operators and traffic nets, and they would pass that message on.
Then is the computer able to hear it and actually print the message out nowadays?
The system for transcribing it based on a computer is not very good. There are, I don't know how to describe that. As AI gets better, I'm afraid it's going to get better. That's going to become more prevalent. But right now, there's not a really good way for computers to transcribe that message. If it was sent to them to a form that they could transcribe, then it would. But as far as radio signals, no. I'm not sure if I'm making that clear.
That they can't decipher what you hear and put it in print form.
It can be done, but it's very difficult. But the strange thing is my radio can do that. This radio will give me it will show me what I'm sending. I can see it printed out there if I want to. And if I'm receiving it, I can theoretically transcribe it from that radio into another form. But it's very difficult to do. You're much better learning Morse code than trying to. I tell my students that for sure.
Well, then that tape machine, it would receive it, and then you would read the tape and encode.
It would print it on the tape. Yeah, and the same process could be done today, but it's not a very big process. And it takes an incredibly good machine to transcribe at higher speeds. You know, it's not complex because it's straightforward. It's really just a series of dits and dots. There's not that many characters. It's hard for people to learn because it's a different type of communication, but it is a language. People talk all over the world in Morse code. I can talk to anybody. I can talk to people in Russia and Germany. In fact, I have students all over the world that are taking this international Morse code classroom because it is international Morse code. It's the same here as it is in Russia, as it is in China, as it is in Japan. It's the same code. The difference is the language. You know, if we're on Zoom, for instance, I can see him there, I can hear his code, we can communicate in code, but I may not be able to speak Japanese, you know, although we don't, normally they speak English, but you see what I mean, the code is the same everywhere. You can send code in, you know, there is a Russian Morse code and a Japanese Morse code, but it doesn't do you any good to send that unless you're sending it to someone who understands Japanese Morse code. But you can send the international Morse code and people understand it, and that's what we do. That's how we communicate around the world all the time. Am I running out of time?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. There's tons of stuff. I mean, I'll just keep going a little bit further. Here's something that's real interesting. Back in 2005, on the NBC Tonight Show, Jay Leno had these two telegraphers come on. Let me just play it for you. Let me see if I can get it to come up here. Come on. Oh, that's not it. This is it. Okay.
Hi, working mortgage company. I'm a loan processor, primary residential. Oh, all right. And do you say no? Can you say, I'm sorry?
No, I don't turn anybody down.
Really?
No.
You must be very popular.
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask
This is
you,
just some lady
do you have a
talking
cell phone?
to
Do you have a
the
cell
audience.
phone?
Yeah.
And I imagine your business text messaging is a huge part.
Yes.
It is. All right. Okay. I'll show you what we're going to play here. We found the fastest text messenger in the country. Let's bring him out. Ben Cook and his friend Jason. Let's bring him out. Ben Cook.
The two kids that send text messages are the fastest text messengers in the world at this time.
Hi, Ben.
Text on a
And
phone.
thanks for dressing for the show, folks. We appreciate it. Ben, tell us about your record.
I typed a 160-character message in 57 seconds.
Okay.
Very quick.
And you accepted the message. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
So you don't really do anything.
It can be tough sometimes, but
Now we're going to see just how fast.
So they texted on two
Let's bring out
phones to
Ken
each
Miller
other.
and Chip Margelli. Come on out here, fellas. You might guess by the way they're dressed. You see, Ken and Chip, they are two Morse code operators. You know what Morse code is?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. How long you guys been doing Morse code?
38 years.
38 years.
43 years in ham radio.
43 years in ham radio. Okay. We're going to give each team a card. with
These guys are
6
amateur radio operators.
Who do you think will be the fastest to get the message to their partner? Morse code or text messaging?
Text
You
messaging.
think text messaging
Oh, yeah.
will beat Morse code? How old is Morse code?
170 years.
170 years. 170 years. Okay. All right, gentlemen, let's sit down at our desks. Okay. Now, in front of you is a card. Don't turn it over just yet. They both have the same sentence on it. When I say ready,
haven't
set,
seen
go,
this
when I say
card.
go, flip over your card and send the message to your partner at the other desk. Okay? Ready, set, go! Yell out as soon as you have the message and then read me the message. You can hear the Morse code. Can you hear it going on?
Yes, I can.
Very exciting. Gets less exciting the more it goes on. Let's see who is faster. Would you read me your message, sir?
I just saved a bunch of money on my car.
That's the message you sent, okay? Very good. Okay, there we have. Ben and Jason, I'm sorry you were beaten by 140-year-old technology. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you also lost, but we have a consolation prize.
All right, that was really interesting. Though. Actually, at the time, it really brought a lot of interest in Morse code too. But it was good to see that. We all, of course, really enjoyed that. And unfortunately, it says here 2 old telegraphers were chosen. These guys really aren't that old. Oh wow, there's a picture of my keys. At one time, I had about 200 keys, but I only have about 100 now, I guess. But there's all kinds of keys. They're a whole lot of fun to use. Oh. I could stop here and answer questions, or I could talk a little bit more. I don't know which one. Any choice? Yeah, Bob.
Back in the 1960s, the news service used to send everything by Morse code. And I was in the service, and we had a guy that could set and receive the Morse code and talk to you and tell you what it was saying at the same time.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And it was fast.
yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how once you get used to doing that, it becomes a whole lot easier. Of course, you know. I remember one time in the Navy, I was up in the radio area, in the radio room. Basically, I'd gone up there to see one of the radio room chiefs. We were up there talking about something. We were talking to the radio room chief, chief petty officer, and there was a couple of officers in there, and we were talking. And of course, all this is going on, and we were having a discussion about something I can't remember. And all of a sudden, the radio chief turned and said, "Tell that guy." I mean, he's listening to this Morse code while we're talking. I mean, he's just, because it's going on in the background. It's like standing in a room in a party, and all those conversations are going on, and you're actually listening to him without realizing it. You know, and so, but when you get proficient with Morse code, it's the same way. You hear it in the background all the time, and that's why I keep telling my students, if you could just relax and let it flow, just listen, don't concentrate on it, it would get a whole lot easier. Because the more you concentrate on things, the harder it is. It's just amazing. You know, we find that in reality, people, when they're concentrating, they only concentrate about 47% of the time. When I'm talking to you about this, 47% of the time you're paying attention to me. And the other 53% of the time you're thinking about something else. But your focus comes and goes all the time. And when you refocus, you focus so much quicker than everything. And that's what we've come to find in Morse code that actually happens. As you're listening to Morse code go along, there's periods when you kind of lose the track, lose the plot. You know, you're not copying anymore. You're like, oh, what? And then you try to, and suddenly you come back online and you start copying again. And it's just like the English language. Unfortunately, it's not as easy to learn as the English language, but it is a lot of fun.
You've got to be a good speller, though, I take.
Well, you'd be surprised at how easy it is sometimes that people spell a word and they misspell it, but you still get the word because it's very close. You know, you put in an I when there should have been an E, or something like that, or you leave a double letter out or something, and it gets real good. Gets easier and easier. Fortunately, in the English language, well, I have a whole class on this. In the English language, we know what the most common words are in the English language. The top 100 words that are used in conversational Morse code, we know what those are. So if you learn those, if you get used to hearing those words, they become easier to hear in Morse code. We know what the most common letters are, the most common first letters in a word are, the most common last letters in a word are. We know suffixes and prefixes, and we teach those. First we teach you the letters and the numbers. Then we teach you pairs of letters and numbers and prefixes and suffixes, and then eventually that vocabulary starts to build in your head. You don't just know A through Z. You know a whole bunch of other things, and so when those words start going by, you start hearing them easier. I know this may sound strange to you, but a word is not easy to hear. You know, that's been. I mean, that's one word, been. Sent it maybe, I don't know. That's probably about 15 words a minute, 18 words a minute, and you can, Morse code it. That's 28 words a minute. That's the way I like to hear Morse code right there, because it's clearer. It's a sound. Every letter becomes a sound instead of, you don't learn A as dit da, you learn A as dit ah. I mean, you learn the sound. If you learn the dits and das, you'll never progress fast in Morse code. And in the old days, we taught it that way. I mean, that's the way I learned it, dit da, but we don't teach that way anymore. And so students do a whole lot better now. Things come faster because, I don't know why I'm teaching about Morse code. I'm supposed to be talking. Yes.
Was there some time in your life that you used something that was really a big deal? I mean, it was very important that it worked the way it did and you got the message through or received the message?
Not me, no. I'm just an amateur radio operator, so I've never really done anything like that.
I thought you did it in the Navy or something.
No, in the Navy, I worked in electronics, but I wasn't. The weird thing was I wasn't an amateur radio operator when I was in the Navy. When I worked around all kinds of electronic equipment, I would have had a lot of fun if I'd have been a ham in those. It's called a ham, an amateur radio operator. But yes, Bob.
When I was in the service, we had a spy network, and the spy network would record and then play it at an accelerated speed. Mm-hmm. And occasionally, very occasionally, in the middle of a transmission, the radio would go dead. And what had happened, he was a counter spy and he was sending the wrong stuff, and he was get away with it.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting thing. People talk about spies and using Morse code, and that still goes on today. There's still, I don't know what I did. There's still spy networks out there. There's still number stations in operation. You've heard of number stations. Those are stations that broadcast messages either in Morse code or voice, and they're actually sending messages to operators in other countries that are doing certain, and they're coded messages that are being sent to them. And they still do that in Morse code today. Morse code is still very active all over the world. There are beacon stations that send out messages in Morse code. At all the airports, there are VOR stations that are sending out information, distance and heading information to aircraft in Morse code. They send their identifier out in Morse code. So Morse code is still used quite a bit. The special services of the military still use Morse code. People say Morse code is no longer dead. Well, amateur radio quit requiring Morse code to become an amateur radio operator. The military theoretically quit using it, but don't believe that, because all the guys that are dropping into other countries in the middle of the night are still using Morse code.
So when you talk about that, it reminds me of the word enigma.
Enigma was a machine that was developed in World War II to break out code, to break down codes, and to send codes. And we, of course, we wanted to copy that machine. I have a whole presentation I do about that.
Oh, good.
So how is, I mean, so if Morse code is universal, how can we transmit on that and it be secure? I mean, if it's, how can it be used where an enemy couldn't just pick it up?
Because they're sending a different code. They're using Morse code, but that is encoded as well.
So they can hear the dots and the dots, but they don't know what they.
But they don't know, it's spelling out a different word.
Oh,
Instead
okay.
of cat, the word is block.
Okay.
And again,
They're encrypting it as they're sending it.
I have a presentation I do about that too. In World War II, they used things called transpositional messages, and they would transpose the letters, and everybody would have a different code. And they used book codes, and it was very easy to break down. But now they use what's called a one-time pad. And so a one-time pad has information on a pad of paper, and the person that is sending it has it, and the person that's receiving it has it. There are only two people have that. They only use one a day. Once they send a message on that paper is destroyed. It can't be broken. It's impossible unless you have that pad of paper, and so nobody has it. So it's gotten very, very secret, I guess is the right word. I mean, even with a computer, you can't break it. And we've got some computers that are unbelievable in the world today.
Well, it is possible because the frequency of the letters being sent, like E is the one that's sent the most. And then from there, the various ones, and they can break it down by that way, by how many times it's in the Morse code, in the message.
It could be, yeah, that's true. If it's repeated, but it's never repeated. It's only sent once. There's only 5 letters sent one time. And it's never repeated again, so there's no way you can go through and try to figure out, oh, here he's E here, and he used he here. That's the way they used to break down the codes when they were using the old more complex. But like I said, I can tell you a lot about that. There's a whole section on women that were telegraphers in during the old days, and I have again, that's another 20 or 30 minutes but that's real interesting because back in the old days, the train lines went by. At every little town where there was a telegrapher, he had a wife probably or a family, and so those families would hear that Morse code all the time. The wives, the kids all knew Morse code. But the husband passed away, a lot of times the wife would take over and become the telegrapher. She would be teaching people, more and more people about, and there's lots of stories about that, about women telegraphers, not only on those train stations, but in the military as well. And so it's not that, I don't know how to say that. I'm not trying to be sexist about that, but it's really interesting to me because for many years, women were not allowed into certain things, and so they were easily accepted as telegraphers because they were very good at it. And, so back in the days when there were a lot of men telegraphers, there was also a lot of women telegraphers, and of course that's a whole other story. Oh, before I forget, there's a book called The Victorian Internet. If you want to read about this information, this book is really good. This is all the stuff I just told you plus a whole lot more. You can actually download this as a PDF, The Victorian Internet. It's by Tom Standage. I meant to bring a handout for this, and if you email me or if you give me your email, I'll send you some information about it. There's another one about women telegraphers called My Sister Telegraphic by Thomas Jefferson. And it's a real good book just about women telegraphers. But the Victorian Internet is fascinating. It goes into a lot more detail on all these different things that I just talked about. What else? Any other questions?
So it sounds like if the AI overlords get us, if we stay to Morse code, we're going to be okay because they can't understand it, right?
They can't break a code.
Yeah.
That code will never be broken. One-time pads, there's no way to ever break those one-time.
All right, well, that's good to know.
It's just impossible because it doesn't exist but a few seconds in time. Because, and fortunately, I don't have a picture of a one-time pad, but Just a good example, let's say it's about this long, and on this page there's 30 or 40 lines of code, 2 different patterns of code. There's 5 letters over here and then another corresponding set of letters over here. And those only correspond to each other on that one line, on that one day, at that one time, at that one instance, and sent to that one pad. So good luck. That's the advantage of the one-time pad. There's actually a movie out about number stations too. John Cusack's in it. Number stations. They don't use Morse code in it. Let's see. Anything else?
I got a question about your name. I saw on that other slide, it's like KKN.
Oh, KK5NA, that's my call sign.
So that was assigned to you by who? The
FCC.
FCC.
Yeah.
And then that's your number for life, right?
Yes, you can change it,
Yeah.
but you have to go through a process through the government to change that to some other call sign.
So, cause I see that on license plates, I guess.
My license plate.
Okay. So you could, it's like almost a social security number. That is you out there in the world. So I always thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, thousands of people have communicated with me using that call sign. Originally, my call sign was KC5KAG. Back in the early days, when you took your tests, you went through different stages. As technician, then advanced operator, and then extra operator. Extra class is the highest class of Morse of amateur radio. So when I got advanced class, I got the KK5NA. I was able to move from 6-digit call sign to a 5-digit call sign. In advanced, you can move to 4-digit call signs. Nowadays, you can move to anything, but in the old days, it meant something. So I went from KC5KAG to KK5NA, and I thought that was great because Barbara, my wife, was KK5QA, and since we were so close, and we always just kept the same one, so when we both got our extra license, we just didn't change it. And so I've always had KK5NA.
Do those numbers mean anything, or is it just a number they assign going down the line?
Yes, it does. Actually, once upon a time, there were districts in the United States. The 5 district was Texas and Oklahoma. Nowadays, though, you can take this. I can take my KK5NA and go live in California, and I don't have to change it. That was one of the rules I didn't care for, but a lot of hams didn't like the idea of having to change if they moved. Well, it originally had a purpose. Now it no longer does have a purpose. Although you can't have a Hawaiian call sign in the States. Hawaii has a specific set of call signs, and all the other countries in the world do too. Only in the United States can you move your call sign.
So is KK Texas? Or what part of that is Texas?
The 5 was originally Texas.
Okay, the 5 is that part of that. So very cool. I was always kind of curious about that. So.
Yeah, I was afraid I would get KK5KK, and then when you're sending Morse code and you move from one person to the other, when it's your turn, I send a K at the end of that, and so I would send my call sign KK5NA K, and that means I'm done. But if I had KK5KK, I would have KK5KKK, and they never know what it is. So fortunately, I didn't get a K, and I don't know of anybody that got the KK at the time. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
What happens if someone or two someones are trying to send a code at the same time?
Well, they just interfere with each other. The louder station, of course, will be the one that you'll hear. Because it's a signal, and it's possible that they'll interfere with you, and that happens at times. But the frequency band is gigantic.
Yeah.
But there are certain frequencies that people like to transmit on, and that becomes a problem sometimes. Yeah, the radio transmission is a whole other fascinating subject. It's amazing. It's a whole lot of fun. There's so many things you can do with amateur radio nowadays that you can do and communicate in many different ways with computers. Computers, of course, make it a whole lot easier for people. You can send Morse code with your computer. You can there's a program you can set it up, and you can actually hook it to your radio, and it will send Morse code at any speed you want. Doesn't make sense to me, but. And there's special programs that communicate digitally with each other. There's a thing called PSK31, which is phase shift keying, is the way it's done. It sends it into your radio, and then it appears on your screen, and you type, and the other person types, and your screen decodes it, and you can communicate with each other that way. And that's not done in Morse code. That's a whole nother technologies. But Morse code is, to me, it's the ultimate way to communicate. It's another language. People say I know 2 languages. Well, I know 2 languages. One of them is Morse code. But I can't just throw it out in the room because there's very few hams. None. There's no more hams living here now. There used to be a couple that lived here, but they weren't into Morse code either.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. Well, thank you, Joe. That was great.
Yeah.